Prije tačno 23 godine predsjedavao je Vijećem sigurnosti Ujedinjenih nacija. Pod njegovim predsjedavanjem donesena je rezolucija o Srebrenici, a potvrđene su i sve ostale, te u aprilu 1993. godine predvodio prvu delegaciju Vijeća sigurnosti u posjeti Srebrenici, kada je upozorio na dešavanja u tom dijelu Bosne i Hercegovine. Uoči drugostepene presude Radovanu Karadžiću, koja će se desiti 20. marta u Hagu, ali i drugih dešavanja vezanih uz tribunal za bivšu Jugoslaviju, s nama je iz Njujorka bivši venezuelanski ambasador u UN-u Diego Arria. Mr. Arria, welcome to N1 program.
Thank you, Smir. It's been some time since I saw you last time in Sarajevo.
During your presidency over the United Nations Security Council in 1993, Council has adopted Resolution 819, which has practically first clear call for action in Srebrenica. Can you remind in short our viewers on this resolution, but also on a mood of the international community at the time regarding Bosnia and Herzegovina?
You know, Smir, the tragic experience of Bosnia have impacted my life and have influenced me tremendously on how to view world problems. The United Nations apply at the time what I call the amoral equivalence of the parties, meaning that the victimizers and the victims, they put them in the same level. And they began talking not of the Bosniak people, but of the Muslim people versus the Serb people. So the beginning, in a way, the United Nations introduced the concept of apartheid in Bosnia, which we can see now is still the reality and what was created after Dayton.
Just days later, you led an United Council delegation to the visit to Srebrenica, but also a region of the Balkans, to talk to Bosnian but also Balkanian leaders. What was the situation at that moment, and what do you remember most from that visit?
Well, I visited our first stop. I was heading the United Nations mission of the Security Council, and we went to Sarajevo to meet with President Izetbegovic and Vice President Ganic at the time. And then we went to Srebrenica, where the United Nations UNPROFOR officers tried to prevent us from even entering Srebrenica. And when we got there, we just discovered that Srebrenica had been surrendered with the support of the United Nations. And I saw so much devastation, so much crime and pain, that I said at the time that a slow-motion genocide was taking place in Srebrenica. And international media covered that, but the United Nations thought that I was exaggerating. Well, a little bit more than a year later, the massacre and the genocide of Srebrenica took place. It was a really horrible failure by the United Nations to face the realities that were so clear to the eyes of the world.
During that visit, you have met Radovan Karadzić. What were your impressions, and how do you see his role and role of Serbia, but also other leaders and other countries in all what has happened here in the region during the wars of 1990s?
Well, I have met Mr. Karadzić before and read his remarks saying that he would clear Srebrenica, which was a nest of rats, he said. Well, I met him at the Belgrade airport together with the other ambassadors that were in my mission. And the man was, you know, the typical trying to look peaceful, but was a criminal. He was telling us that he would allow the water to come into Srebrenica, the food and the medicines support of the United Nations. And of course, he did not. My deposition in the case against Milosevic, where I was a witness, was used again also in the case of Mr. Karadzić. And I think he's such a horrible figure for the whole former Yugoslavia area. And I am glad that even though many years have passed, he's finally getting the punishment he deserves.
Mr. Karadzić was sentenced to 40 years in prison in the first instance. Now he's facing a final judgment. But there are still open questions regarding the first sentence, in particular about the Genocide 1, which is regarding 6 municipalities. What are your expectations from appeal judgment?
Well, I certainly hope that the evidence against Mr. Karadzić, probably as the worst, together with General Mladic, or the worst criminals, will be upheld and the appellate judges will confirm the decision to put him in jail, in a way will be for life.
Commander of Army of Republika Srpska, General Mladić, is also in appeal process at the MICT. He was sentenced to life in prison in first judgment. How you look on his situation? And also, he has asked to be released on a temporary basis to visit the grave of his daughter and his family members.
Well, if all the poor Bosniaks who lost their families were allowed to do the same during the war, but they were never allowed to do that. They were, you know, in concentration camps. I think Mladić is probably the worst butcher of the Balkans. And I'm sure, I have to believe that there are more than enough evidence. I provided some of them, and many people provided so much information and evidence about it that he will be absolutely condemned, and that the appellate judges will confirm that decision.
Do you believe that those decisions could influence reconciliation and processes of peace in Western Balkans area, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina?
Unfortunately, not necessarily. You know, these acts which are necessary, of course, generate passions. General Mladić, Karadžić, like Milosevic and others, criminals, you know, became sort of heroes for some Serbian nationalists. And of course, the decision to put them in jail for life will generate problems. But there are other causes that are already generating problems after the Dayton Agreement that, as I always held, was imposed on the President Izetbegovic, because the other option was just to continue the killing of Bosnians.
Mr. Ambassador, you're one of the ICTI founders, and you have closely worked with the first Chief Prosecutor, Mr. Richard Goldstone. I spoke with him, and he's quite positive about ICTI Legacy and its future as a part of international system of justice. What is your opinion on ICTI and its future or part as a system of international justice?
I agree with the Judge Goldstone. And he proved to be an excellent prosecutor. I believe that the tribunal was the precursor to the International Criminal Court. So it served its purpose. One, it prosecuted the worst criminals. And second, it opened the door for the creation of the Hague International Criminal Court. And I agree with Judge Goldstone that, in general, it could have been faster. The proceedings, in my view, were too slow. They were allowing, in an attempt to be as independent and objective as possible, they extended. I remember the Milosevic case was such a long, they allowed him such leeway to extend his interventions. But the bottom line is that the legacy is positive, and I repeat, it helped to create the International Criminal Court, which already is a very important issue.
Let me ask you this for the end of this conversation. You're probably one of the few people in the world, especially from Latin America, who's related to Western Balkans, especially to Bosnia and Herzegovina, for almost the last of the 3 decades. What is your opinion on the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and how do you see Bosnia in the next 5 to 10 years?
You know, I've been in Bosnia several times since the end of the war. And I continue to be extremely worried for what I said at the beginning, that Bosnia was being divided on an apartheid manner. And in a way, it happens. Srebrenica, which was the origin of the war to a great extent, is today under the control of the people who precisely committed the genocide in Srebrenica. I can see it in the schools with different doors to enter. So apartheid was promoted in Bosnia by the United Nations, the same organization that helped to end and put an end to apartheid in South Africa. I believe that the future of Bosnia is going to be very complex. It's slow. It will affect these people if the same arrangement of Dayton preserved. And now Russia wants to include the issue of Bosnia Herzegovina into a new stage of a Cold War. I am very concerned by the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much, and thank you for joining N1.
Thank you so much, Smir. Dobro.
Poštovani gledaoci, bio je to ekskluzivni razgovor s nekadašnjim predsjedavajućim Vijeća sigurnosti UN-a i bivšim venecuelanskim diplomatom Diego Arrijom u povodu drugostepene presude Radovanu Karadžiću pred mehanizmom za međunarodne krivične sudove.